Today I would like to emphasize a few issues that I didn't focus on before. Plus, I would like to address a religion that I skipped in the previous videos, or not skipped, actually didn't mention at all, and to explain my reasoning behind it. So, let's first of all summarize the idea. The idea is that monotheism is a political decision. It's not a religion, it's a political decision and some form of ideology, basically, that rulers or dynasties during their formation use to establish themselves. So, my definite take on this is that we need to address monotheism, actually, and polytheism too, as really within their historical and political context, as political decisions themselves, not as a religion. And the one who are behind them should not also be discussed or addressed as religious figures. I mean, even if we want to, we can, but still we should always focus only on the political aspect of monotheism. Now, the other issue that I really skipped last time was Zoroastrism. And I didn't mention it as part of the monotheistic religions. So let me explain myself why I did or made this decision. I do believe that Zoroastrianism influenced all monotheistic religions of the region. They introduced the main concepts of monotheism as we know it today. Creatio as ex nihilo, which is important, one God, life after death, heaven and hell, the soul. Most of the ideological foundation of monotheism were really, one way or another, introduced by Zoroastrianism. Now, why Zoroastrianism didn't make this much impact or didn't leave this much impact in the rest of the world, even though we know it influenced for sure Judaism and Islam for definitely a big chunk of it. And maybe another time I can discuss Salman al-Farsi or Salman the Persian, who seems to have influenced Muhammad extremely. To the point that Aisha, the wife of Muhammad, complained and said, "Why do you spend so much time with Salman the Persian?" And Muhammad said at that time, of course, that he's teaching him Islam. In reality, it may be the other way around. We know that the 5 prayers are definitely there from a Persian Zoroastrian influence. The idea of afterlife, hell and heaven, the soul, as developed by Muslim eschatology somehow, is very Zoroastrian. So why did I skip it? I skip it for a few reasons. All of them together can justify or explain my position. There was this dualistic, first of all, approach. If good and bad are co-equal somehow, that doesn't lead to the perception of a pure monotheism as we understand it and as was developed by Islam. You do not have anything co-equal to, I mean, if Ahura Mazda is co-equal to Ahriman, the good and the evil, basically, then we have some form of a dualistic approach. Dualism is not exactly monotheism. Now, the second part is that we know for sure that Zoroastrianism itself, it was a form of syncretism. It included or incorporated a lot of things from previous religion that we do not know much about it. Plus, the way it was developed by Zoroaster is made it almost like a monolatrous religion. Monolatry, as I explained it before, in the sense that Zoroaster did not reject other gods. He just thought that Ahura Mazda is the main one, but it doesn't reject the others. So he was quite open to tolerate other gods. So Ahura Mazda will be the best, the greatest of all, but it didn't mean the others didn't exist. And that also sheds some doubt on the issue of a pure monotheism. The third thing is that although Zoroastrianism developed the idea of afterlife and heaven and hell and soul and stuff like that, the approach to bodies, to dead bodies, wasn't really very convincing. And I do not understand why we expose bodies in Zoroastrianism to the element until they disintegrate, as the body is evil and needs to we get rid of it basically by leaving it to the element and to the scavengers and vultures and stuff like that. The body is extremely important. The afterlife is extremely important, which tells me something, that the two ideas were developed at two different times. The exposure to the elements was probably prior to Zoroaster. It was a tradition that was there. And Zoroaster, when he came in, added it to a belief in heaven and hell. He should have, honestly, he should have went back, he should have gone back to the idea of the exposure to the element and revised it, changed it, improved it somehow, because it doesn't make any sense. The body is extremely important. And look at Islam. Islam is really irrational when it comes to the body. We know it's not our body that will be resurrected in Islam. We know that God supposedly will create another body. So why do we keep the old ones? Why do we maintain them? And we are also opposed, like Jews, to tattoos, because we don't want to alter God's bodies. That's another kind of irrational approach to death. Jews, there is no clear idea about heaven and hell. I don't understand why they want to preserve the bodies. Why? What's the point of it? There is no life after death. There is, as I said before, there is only death after death in Judaism. So why do you preserve the body? What's the point? So these are things that really got really confusing here about how to approach death within a monotheistic kind of ideology or faith. And I believe that here the issue is certainly the different sources that impacted the work that Zoroaster did on previous religion. So he kept some from previous religion, added his own, but he didn't reconcile them, because if he reconciled them or even tried to reconcile them, he would have noticed that this doesn't make much sense. You cannot leave the body for total exposure to vulture and to the elements while still talking about an afterlife. Why would you do that? Uh, Now, the last part, which was also related to the same topic, actually, it's Zoroastrianism, is about dating. Dating in in the sense that what date should we give, since we don't have any reference, there are no names or location or places mentioned in the religious scripts of the Zoroastrianism. We still cannot decide to what era it belonged, or so my own take, based on my understanding of the whole thing, is that uh, um, we have to associate monotheism, or the development of Zoroastrian monotheism, with some form of state or development of the idea of a state. So, how do I do that? I mean, since my impression is that monotheism was used, I mean, monotheism at that time, the way Zoroaster developed it or revised it somehow, make me or gives me the sense that the idea should have been developed around also the development of a central state. And for this reason, despite the fact that some people give a lifespan of 60 years for Zoroaster, but starting around 1500 BC, I don't believe that. I really don't take it, because there was no reason to develop a monotheistic belief system at that time. The empire were so small, no really important anything. The first time, I think, should be a reason to believe that monotheism was developed in its Zoroastrian form was with the Achaemenid Empire. That means 600 BC, around that time, around 600 BC. I think I will place Zoroaster around that time. And in that way, I also avoid the other issue, because some people think, or some researcher actually, think that Zoroastrianism was the first monotheistic religion of the region, even before Akhenaton. I do not buy that. I do think that I associate Zoroaster with the Achaemenid Empire, therefore around 600 sometimes BC, which places it definitely after Akhenaton's era or time. Now, what we know from resources about the Achaemenid Empire is that it imposed a successful centralized bureaucratic administration. It has, I mean, it was really a centralized system, which goes well with a centralized faith too, and I mean by that monotheism. So, in my opinion, yes, the Achaemenid Empire was the time, and probably around Cyrus the Second, or sometimes around that Zoroaster probably lived and developed and remodeled somehow Zoroastrianism. And the reason, as I explained it, is that the centralized form of government developed under the Achaemenid Empire gives me the impression that was also the time of Zoroaster. That's when he worked, that's when he did the whole thing. Now, what does that leave me with? If that's the case, I also would like to emphasize the new Babylonian Empire, which was, as we know, Nebuchadnezzar the second, who really forced the captivity. We know from the Old Testament that it was not mentioned that, which is the same time of the Achaemenid Empire. It did not mention that this ruler, this Babylonian ruler, was Zoroastrian, which makes me believe that because of the proximity, if Zoroastrian was already fully developed by then, there should have been some mention of the Zoroastrian faith. But in this case, no, the Old Testament didn't mention anything related to Zoroastrianism at that time. So I still believe that it was just starting around the 6th century BC. Zoroastrianism was starting, and Zoroaster was also probably active at that time, and it took him probably 200, around 200 probably years to develop, even though, as we know, the Zoroastrianism, although it had a lot of influence on other religions, it didn't establish itself well, neither in Iran nor in other places, and it was always impacted by other faith, other rules, other religion. And we know that Alexander the Great, though was an admirer of Cyrus the Great, did not act as a Zoroastrian kind of ruler. So this is actually why. On the other hand, when we get to Islam and Muhammad especially, it seems that he definitely was heavily influenced by Zoroastrianism. We have also some indication that for some reason Muhammad took money from people of the book, Christian and Jews, and we know why he did it. He said those are the people of the book, they had from a book from God. But he also took money also from Zoroastrian. The only exception to the idea of people of the book are Zoroastrian. Why did he take money from them? We don't have a good explanation for that, but we know that when Muslims were met by Zoroastrian in Bahrain, Muhammad instructed the ruler back then to take money from them in exchange for protection, etc. But he took it from them as if they were people of the book, and we don't know why. There is no book associated at that time with Zoroastrian. Even if there was one, Muhammad did not know about it. So why did he make that decision? Makes me wonder that Muhammad was definitely under the influence of Salman the Persian, and he probably, the way Salman introduced Zoroastrianism to Muhammad made it sound like a monotheist religion, and I think that makes a lot of sense, because why otherwise he accepted money in exchange for protection from the Zoroastrian, when he told us literally that he will accept it only from people of the book, and the people of the book, as we know, are only Christian and Jews. So this is basically a summary of what I wanted to add. So I would say that monotheism is a political decision. It's an ideology rather than faith. It was used to establish central government, and it worked well for that specific reason. But as soon as these states disintegrated, the idea of monotheism also disintegrated with it, and it was a returning or recurring kind of topic. As soon as the government or empire wanted to establish themselves, they switched it back or went back, reverted somehow. I won't say reverted, but yeah, they used monotheism as a very good excuse to establish themselves. On the other hand, I also talked about Zoroastrianism and why I didn't include it with the main monotheist religion, even though I think it has most of the ingredients of a monotheist religion, but it was developed late, first of all, and then it wasn't really a central main religion. Even in Iran for a long time, it was intermittent time, but it left its impact on, especially on Islam. It definitely did leave an impact on Islam. Those same ingredients might have impacted Jews during captivity, when they were in captivity during Nebuchadnezzar II. So it might be the original sources of Zoroastrianism were already there, and probably Jews learned a lot from them, or very likely learned a lot from them. But as I said before, Judaism is definitely way too complex form of syncretism that there is nothing really original there. We can never tell which part came from where, because Italy took from everywhere and everyone, and we didn't keep any records of that except what the writer of the Old Testament wanted us to see, and those people who we really also don't know could have really formed their idea their own way. They had probably also their own impression. They probably found names like, I don't know, they probably found some stories talking about somebody by the name of Moses, and they were thinking, okay, so this guy is here in the story, let's give him some kind of etymological roots. Let's make him Jewish and find some Hebrew kind of correspondence with his name. So it really doesn't mean that they knew exactly what's going on. They found themselves exposed to a lot of texts from a lot of sources, and they tried to justify them and explain them. And it doesn't make any sense to try to understand from their explanation our understanding of Judaism. No, instead we need to know that those people did not know, and they came up with an explanation, regardless whether it made sense or not. For them, it made sense, so they put it there. We don't need to take it seriously. We need to know it, definitely, but it's not really... so, this is basically the summary of today's video about Zoroastrianism and monotheism as a political or in an ideology rather than religion or faith. Thank you.